Lauren sighed, rolling her eyes as she placed her coffee cup down with just a little too much force. Ethan, you have to stop overthinking everything. It's exhausting. Ethan sat across from her at their sleek kitchen table, his fingers tapping absently against the dark oak surface. His expression remained unreadable, though inside, his thoughts swirled like a storm. He had always been the type to trust, to give the benefit of the doubt, to believe in the person he loved, but trust, once cracked, never quite fit back together the same way again. The first time he caught something suspicious, it had been small. So small, in fact, that he had nearly let it slide. A late-night work dinner that hadn't been on her calendar. A text notification from an unsaved number that she'd dismissed as spam. A faint whiff of cologne that wasn't his as she climbed into bed one night. It could all be nothing. And that's exactly what Lauren had told him each time. You're imagining things, babe. You're being paranoid. Do you really think I'd do something like that to you? Ethan had wanted to believe her. He truly had. But there was something about the way she dismissed his concerns so effortlessly, like swatting away an annoying gnat, that left a bitter taste in his mouth. Tonight, it was happening again. Lauren sat in front of him, exuding the same effortless confidence she always had. She was still stunning. Golden brown hair falling over one shoulder, her lips painted in a subtle shade of rose, her manicured nails tapping against her coffee mug as she spoke. You always do this, she said with a slight shake of her head, like she was scolding a child. Looking for problems that don't exist, Ethan exhaled slowly, giving her a small, almost amused smile. You're right, babe. Let's clear it up. Her brow furrowed slightly, just for a fraction of a second, so fast that most people wouldn't have caught it, but Ethan did. He noticed everything now. He reached for his phone, placed it gently on the table, and turned the screen toward her. Then, without another word, he pressed play. The soft static of a voicemail filled the room, followed by a man's voice. Smooth, confident, and damning. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. Same time tomorrow? The color drained from Lauren's face. For a long moment, silence filled the kitchen, thick and suffocating like smoke after a fire. Lauren's hand, which had been resting casually around her coffee cup, twitched slightly. Her carefully composed expression froze, eyes locked on the phone, lips parting, just enough to reveal a sharp intake of breath she hadn't meant to take. Ethan, however, remained exactly as he was. He didn't move, didn't speak. He simply watched, his gaze steady, unwavering. He had prepared himself for this moment, for every possible reaction she could have. Shock, anger, denial, tears. He had considered them all, and none of them would change what he already knew. Lauren blinked rapidly and let out a short, nervous laugh, the sound brittle and artificial. Ethan, come on, she said, waving a hand dismissively, though her fingers trembled slightly. You seriously think that's me? Do you have any idea how many wrong numbers I get? Spam calls, telemarketers? God, I had one last week trying to sell me timeshares in Florida. You're really going to sit here and act like this means anything? Ethan tilted his head slightly, considering her. It was fascinating, in a way, watching her mind work, calculating, scrambling for the right move. She was quick, he had to give her that, but he had known her for too long, knew when her charm was natural and when it was manufactured. Right now she was grasping at straws, trying to stay ahead of the tidal wave about to crash down over her. You know what's funny, Lauren? His voice was calm, almost conversational. That voicemail wasn't a random number. It wasn't spam. It was from Brian. He let the name hang in the air, heavy and deliberate. Lauren's body went rigid, her eyes flicking up to meet his. There it was, that tiny crack in her mask, the one she hadn't been able to fully conceal. Brian? She echoed, as if the name was foreign to her, as if it didn't taste familiar on her lips. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. Yeah, Brian. You know, the guy you've been seeing behind my back? A deep exhale left Lauren's lips, and she straightened in her chair, regaining a bit of composure. You're being ridiculous, she said, shaking her head. I don't know what you think you heard, but this isn't what you always do this, Ethan interrupted smoothly, his voice eerily even. You always have an excuse, a perfect little story, a way to twist reality just enough so that I start to question myself, so that I start to wonder if maybe I really am just being paranoid. But not this time, Lauren. Not this time. Her eyes flashed, irritation creeping into her features. Ethan, stop, she snapped, her voice sharper now, edged with desperation. You're blowing this way out of proportion. If you actually think I'd cheat on you, then maybe the problem isn't me, it's you. Maybe you've been so busy looking for problems in our marriage that you've convinced yourself of something that isn't even real. Ethan exhaled a quiet laugh, shaking his head. God, you really don't stop, do you? He reached for his phone again, tapping the screen. I figured you'd try to gaslight me, so I made sure I had more than just a voicemail. He pressed another button, and this time a second recording played. Lauren's voice, clear as day, unmistakable. I'll try to get away for a little longer next time. You make me feel alive, Brian. I don't want to go back to pretending. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. There was nothing left to spin, no excuse to craft. Her own voice had damned her. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his voice dropping to a whisper. Want to try that excuse again? Lauren's face was drained of color now, her confidence stripped away like peeling paint. Her fingers clenched into the fabric of her dress, and for the first time in their entire relationship, she looked truly afraid. Lauren's fingers twitched slightly as they gripped the edge of the table, knuckles turning white. Her mouth opened, then closed again, as if she was struggling to form a coherent thought. The silence between them stretched, tense and suffocating. Ethan said nothing. He simply let her sit in it, let her feel the weight of her own words echoing back at her. She had spent years perfecting the art of deception, twisting reality to suit her needs, weaving lies so seamlessly that even he had doubted his own instincts at times. But this moment was different. There was no escape route, no carefully crafted excuse that could erase the sound of her own voice, confessing to another man. Still, he watched her with cold curiosity, wondering what her next move would be. Lauren had always been quick on her feet. Would she deny it outright, claim it was a joke, say it was taken out of context? Would she cry, play the victim, try to twist this back on him? Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, her chest rising and falling too quickly. Then, like a switch flipping, her entire demeanor shifted. The panic in her eyes dulled, replaced by something calculated. You know what, Ethan, she said, her voice steadying as she leaned back in her chair. Fine. You caught me. Are you happy now? Ethan let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. Happy? No, Lauren. I'm not happy. I'm disgusted. Lauren scoffed, rolling her eyes. Oh, please, don't act like some helpless victim. You wanted this. You wanted to catch me in something. You've been looking for a reason to be angry at me for months, and now that you have one, you're reveling in it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You think I wanted this? That I wanted to find out my wife, he gestured to the phone on the table, still open to the voicemail, has been sneaking around behind my back? That I wanted to hear you tell another man that he makes you feel alive? Jesus, Lauren, do you even hear yourself? She crossed her arms, tilting her chin up defiantly. You don't get it, do you? You never did. Our marriage has been dead for a long time, Ethan. You just refuse to see it. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. So what? Instead of talking to me like an adult, you decided to screw around behind my back? Classy, Lauren exhaled harshly, shaking her head. I tried talking to you. I tried so many times, but you were always too busy, too distant, too cold. Do you have any idea how lonely I've been, Ethan? He let out a bitter laugh. Oh, that's rich. You were lonely, so your solution was to cheat? You had options, Lauren. You could have told me you were unhappy. You could have asked for a divorce. But instead you played me for a fool. Lauren's expression flickered, just for a moment. A sliver of uncertainty, maybe even guilt, passed through her eyes, but she quickly masked it with indifference. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she muttered, more to herself than to him. Ethan studied her carefully. Then how was it supposed to be, Lauren? Were you planning to keep this up forever? Or were you just waiting for the right moment to leave? She swallowed hard, but didn't answer. Ethan exhaled, shaking his head. You know what? It doesn't even matter anymore. I've wasted enough time trying to believe in someone who never really existed. Lauren flinched at that, her mask cracking slightly. "That's not fair," she said, her voice quieter now. "You make it sound like I never loved you." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his voice sharp. "Did you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you loved yourself a hell of a lot more." A tense silence settled over them. For the first time, Lauren looked uncertain, like she wasn't sure which version of herself to be. The defiant, unapologetic woman who had nothing to regret, or the broken wife who had lost everything in a single moment. She let out a shaky breath. "I never meant to hurt you, Ethan." He gave her a long, measured look before replying. "But you did." Lauren opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. For the first time in their entire marriage, she had nothing left to say. And for the first time, Ethan didn't need to hear anything else. Lauren's eyes darted across the table, searching for something, some escape, some excuse, some way to turn the situation back in her favor. But for once, there was nothing left to grasp onto. Every trick, every carefully constructed argument had crumbled beneath the undeniable weight of truth. Ethan remained calm, his fingers still lightly tapping against the wooden table as if counting down the seconds until this farce was over. He had spent months doubting himself, questioning his instincts, letting Lauren manipulate reality just enough to keep him tethered. But now, there was nothing to question. The truth was sitting right in front of him, as clear as the betrayal in her eyes. Lauren exhaled sharply, her frustration mounting. "So what now?" she asked, her voice tight, forced. "You just sit there, acting like you're some perfect victim, like you didn't play a role in this?" Ethan let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. "That's the best you've got? Blaming me?" He leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "Go on, then. Tell me. How exactly is this my fault?" Lauren crossed her arms, her posture shifting into something defensive. "You shut me out, Ethan. You buried yourself in work and your routines and everything except us. You think marriage is just about loyalty, but what about attention, affection? What about feeling wanted?" Ethan's expression remained neutral, though something inside him twisted. Not because her words hurt, but because he had expected them. He had known she would try to turn the blame, to make herself the victim. It was textbook Lauren. Twist the truth, rewrite the past, make herself the wounded party. "You felt unwanted," Ethan repeated, his voice slow, deliberate. "So naturally, the solution was to go screw Brian. Not to talk to me, not to tell me what you needed, but to run off and have an affair. Makes perfect sense." Lauren's jaw clenched, her fingers digging into her own arms. "You don't get it," she muttered. "No," Ethan said, his voice finally sharpening, steel creeping into his tone. "You don't get it, Lauren. I did want you. I did love you. I was there. I was present. I was trying. But every single time I asked if something was wrong, every time I tried to bridge the distance, what did you do? You rolled your eyes, you laughed, you made me feel like I was crazy for even asking." He let out a breath, shaking his head. "And the whole damn time, you were lying to my face." Lauren's mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, she looked small, deflated, like she was finally realizing just how far she had pushed him. Ethan didn't feel satisfaction in that. He didn't feel relief, just exhaustion. "I used to think we had something real," he said after a long pause. "I used to believe you, even when my gut told me not to, even when the signs were all there. But you know what the worst part is, Lauren?" She swallowed, barely managing to shake her head. "The worst part is that I let you do this to me," Ethan continued, his voice quieter now. "I let you make me doubt myself. I let you twist reality so many times that I started wondering if maybe I really was just paranoid." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Turns out, I wasn't paranoid enough." Lauren flinched at that, her nails now pressing so hard into her skin that they left faint red marks. Ethan took a deep breath, as if clearing the weight from his chest, and then in the calmest voice imaginable, he said the words that finally shattered the last remnants of Lauren's control. "I'll send the divorce papers." For a moment there was no reaction, no movement, no sound, and then Lauren's eyes widened. "Ethan, wait," she started, reaching for him, her voice suddenly desperate. "We can talk about this. Please. You don't have to." But Ethan was already standing, already stepping away from the table, Already done. No, Lauren, he said, his tone final. I do have to. She rose from her chair too, frantic now, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Ethan, don't do this. I was stupid, okay? I made a mistake. But I love you. Ethan paused, his gaze locking onto hers one last time. He had spent years loving her, years believing in her, years thinking that no matter how difficult things got, they would always find their way back to each other. But love wasn't a shield against betrayal, and no matter what she said now, there was no coming back from this. He shook his head slowly. No, Lauren, you don't love me. You love control. You love knowing that no matter what you do, I'll always be here, waiting for you to throw me another lie to believe. His voice softened, but his resolve did not. Not anymore. Lauren's breath hitched, her eyes glossy, with something that might have been regret, might have been fear, might have been the realization that she had finally, truly lost. Ethan turned away before she could say anything else. And this time, when he walked away, he wasn't looking back. Ethan stepped away from the kitchen table, his movements slow, deliberate, as if savoring the finality of it all. For years, Lauren had held the upper hand, spinning reality, manipulating the truth, making him question his own instincts. But now, she had nothing left. No excuse, no clever retort, no way to twist this into his fault. And that silence, that speechlessness, was all the confirmation he needed. Behind him, he could hear her breathing shift, hear the way she sucked in air through her teeth like she was about to launch into another desperate plea. He could practically feel her scrambling for something, anything, to change the course of this moment. Ethan, please, she finally said, and this time her voice was soft, trembling, real. There was no arrogance, no dismissive condescension, no casual gaslighting, just fear. And he didn't turn around. He didn't need to see the look in her eyes to know exactly what she was feeling. Panic. For the first time, she wasn't the one controlling the situation. For the first time, she was losing something she couldn't talk her way out of. Eden, she tried again, her voice cracking. I don't want to lose you. The words should have meant something. A few months ago, they would have meant something. But now? Now, they were nothing but the last desperate thrashings of a woman who had already lost. Ethan sighed and shook his head. You lost me the moment you decided to lie, he said simply. She let out a sharp exhale, as if she'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she muttered, almost to herself. Ethan turned slightly, just enough to glance at her over his shoulder. Then how was it supposed to be, Lauren? He asked. Were you going to keep playing both sides? Keep sneaking around? Keep feeding me lies? Keep pretending everything was fine, while you had someone else waiting in the background? Lauren shook her head rapidly, her eyes glassy now. No, it wasn't like that, she whispered, but Ethan just gave a short, humorless chuckle. It was exactly like that, he said. You just never thought you'd get caught. Lauren opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew he was right. Ethan let the silence hang for a moment before turning fully toward her, his expression unreadable. You know what the sad part is? He asked. She swallowed hard. What? I actually wanted to believe you, he admitted. Every time you brushed off my suspicions, every time you laughed at me for questioning things, every time you made me feel crazy for seeing what was right in front of me, I wanted to believe you. Lauren flinched, her fingers gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. But I don't anymore, Ethan continued, his voice quieter now. I don't believe a damn thing that comes out of your mouth, and I never will again. She sucked in a shaky breath, her entire body trembling now. Ethan, please, she tried one last time. I love you. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line as he studied her, really studied her, for what felt like the first time in years. He used to see the woman he fell in love with, the woman he built a life with, but now? Now all he saw was a stranger. You love the way I trusted you, he corrected. You love the fact that I never questioned you. You loved that I always gave you the benefit of the doubt, but me? You stopped loving me the moment you decided I wasn't enough. Lauren's lower lip trembled. She looked like she wanted to argue, to fight back, to find some way to reverse this inevitable end. But there was nothing left to say. Ethan turned, walking toward the door. As he reached for his jacket, he spoke one final time. "I'll send the papers," he said, his tone calm, emotionless. Lauren let out a broken sob, but he didn't stop. He didn't look back. And when he walked out of that house, he knew one thing for certain. He was never coming back.